Are we on?
Yeah, we're ready to go. Yep.
Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Melton Borough Council Scrutiny Committee. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak. Please switch mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it's an emergency evacuation when the emergency exit should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I'll now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by the emergency exit. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I'd just like to take a moment to welcome new officers who are here for the first time this evening. Ryan Finnegan, who's the Waste and Environmental Services Manager, and this is his first meeting. And I'd also like to welcome Lydia Russlin, the council's new Director of Place and Prosperity, who is officially started in Melton in January, but is so keen she's come ahead of time to see how we operate at Scrutiny. So welcome to both of you. Okay, on to the agenda. First item is apologies for absence, and we have received apologies from councillors Child, Cliff and Lumley, and I believe everyone else is present. Right, minutes. Now, you will have received an email today, if you've seen your emails today, with the minutes of the meeting held last week. I think we'll all appreciate that's actually a pretty quick turnaround, but nevertheless, I'm not sure that all members will have had a chance to read those minutes. I mean, we have the option of deferring approval of those to the next meeting, just to ensure everybody's had a chance to read them properly. Are the committee happy with doing that? Yeah. Okay, so we'll table them for the next meeting, but they are there for your information, obviously, in the meantime. Item 3 on the agenda is the response tracker. This was set up, as you'll know, so that issues raised at meetings would be reviewed again at following meetings. Now, in fact, there's nothing from the last meeting to be picked up on the tracker, so that's why it's not attached to this, but it is still a procedure we will follow in the future. Item 4, declarations of interest. I'd like to invite any members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Thwaites.
Yeah, it's just to actually say that I'm the chairman of the Friends of Greaton Court, which is mentioned in one of the reports, but it's a voluntary position, so it's non-pecuniary. So,
thank you for that. Are there any other declarations? No, thank you. Item 5, review of the forward plan. The forward plan is attached to the papers for the meeting. Of course, we did this at last week's meeting. But if there are any issues since then, if there's any member wishes to raise, please do so now. No, thank you. Item 6, likewise, review of the scrutiny work programme. And it's reflected in the minutes circulated today. We did make some changes to the work programme at the last meeting, and that has now been updated. Are there any other issues members wish to raise tonight? Thank you. There is actually some benefit in having meetings one week after the other, because we could rattle through some of the issues because we've covered them very recently. Okay, so we move on to item 7, and that is the subject matter is the Cleaner, Greener Melton and the collaboration to support environmental quality. Obviously, the report is in the papers for tonight's meeting, and I think we'll start tonight with the Director for Housing and Communities and the Waste and Environmental Services Manager are going to introduce the report, supported by a presentation. So over to you, Michelle.
Brill, thank you very much. So Ryan, I'll take us through the presentation, then I look to you for the questions, if that's okay. So members, you have got a copy of the presentation in front of you, if that's easier for you to read and make notes as we go along. Obviously very happy to take any questions that you might have. So in terms of cleaner, greener melting, it's a really broad agenda, really broad subject. And what we've tried to do in this report is just try and give some focus and clarity around what that means to us, the types of services, partnerships and contracts that covers, and the things that we're trying to achieve overall. So the presentation follows the format of the report, and what we've tried to do is just bring some of those elements of the report to life a little bit. So just focusing first of all is around the corporate strategy. So the council has got a renewed and enhanced focus around pride in place, and that is pride in our whole place, so the whole borough, with that long-term vision around Melton being recognised as clean, green and attractive, and with those commitments around becoming a net zero borough. Now they are long-term aspirations, and to support delivery of those we have the initial 4-year delivery plan. I know that's very small text in the on the slide, but you've got that set out in the report. So really all of those actions and commitments sit within theme 1, so focused on healthy communities and neighbourhoods, although as I hope you'll have picked up from the report, there is overlap with a number of other areas of work because this agenda is cross-cutting. So for example, it cross-cuts with our commitments around climate change and other things like that as well. Just a few things to draw your attention to in terms of the corporate strategy, and I think it's really important that we always bring us back to this as a starting point to confirm how well we're delivering and making progress. And that really reflects the increased focus and prioritisation of resources around a cleaner, greener Melton and a coalescing of resources around those. And later we'll share some reflections about how we can do more and go further in respect of that. The commitments there around the initial 4-year delivery plan, and they are set out in your report. And what's really important is that we have that requirement to manage our resources really carefully and as effectively as we can, to do a number of things. So to deliver on those corporate strategy commitments, but also to make sure we manage the business as usual, so the day job, and that we can manage ad hoc requests, be they because there are health and safety matters that might emerge or pressing issues that might emerge, but we do have a number of ad hoc requests that can come in as well, and sometimes that can present resourcing challenges that we need to try and find a coherent way forward with. And what's really key and clear to us is that there is real importance of collaboration if we're going to make a difference in regards to this agenda. So collaboration between teams, with our external partners, contractors, community groups, and really critically volunteers. And it really struck me when we were pulling the report together just how big that volunteer effort is in the community and across the borough. That makes a real difference. And I know, Councillor Glancy, it's something you're really passionate about, making sure that we celebrate and recognise, because without our volunteers making Melton cleaner, greener and doing some of their great work, we wouldn't have, a lot of those things that we are so proud of. So I've reflected that in the report, and if you'll indulge me in a few minutes, I want to show you some of those examples as well. What I did want to do, without going through all of the detail in the report, I wanted to draw your attention to 2 particular areas that we've highlighted around the corporate strategy. The first being around a commitment to establish an operational pride in place group, and the second being around that wider partnership effort. So in terms of pride in place, again, I hope it's clear from the report that if we are going to make the best use of our resources and have the greatest impact, we need to make sure that we are collaborating across our teams. The work of the environmental maintenance team is really key to a cleaner, greener borough, but it is not their job, in isolation. So one of the things that we've been looking to do is try to pull together those resources, knowledge, expertise, and to make sure that we can better manage requests that might come through, because this is such a cross-cutting theme. So with the support of the portfolio holder, we have started to establish an operational group known as our Pride in Place group, and a number of teams form part of that. So environmental maintenance, corporate property and assets, and making sure there's alignment between those teams, but also things around tourism, regeneration, housing, planning, environmental health and communities, so our Empowering Communities team. And we've had an initial workshop to start to set out, well, what does that look like and what does that mean to us? And it was a really powerful session with teams, sparking ideas in each other and better understanding how they can get the most out of the resources that we've got, by sharing that knowledge. It was a great session, Ryan, wasn't it, for all of the teams? So we'll build on that. We'll build the terms of reference for that. And we want to make sure that that is really visible to the council, but also to the wider community. And then through that group, for colleagues to have those links out to other partners, be those businesses, contractors, stakeholders, volunteers, community groups. And what was really interesting from the session that we had the other week was that we've got so many people wanting to be real ambassadors for Melton and what it has to offer as a place. And we need to make sure that we're maximising those connections to really do that justice. We hope that through the group as well, it will help us to prioritise projects, have clarity around delivery arrangements, and then also manage some of those ad hoc requests that come through. So what sometimes happens is requests will come to multiple teams, and then it's difficult sometimes to kind of triage and prioritise and work out how are we going to deploy resources and how do we do that in a way that is manageable within the context of everything that teams need to achieve. And what we've set out in the report is the breadth of things that are covered as part of this agenda. So we think that would really help, and the teams are really motivated to have that as an approach that supports them, but then also to coalesce around funding opportunities or project opportunities to maximise impact. So a very live example is making sure we make the best use of the resources set aside to support a cleaner, greener Melton through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because all of the teams working together can have much greater impact than they could in isolation. And as I said earlier, there is the link across with the wider ambitions of the council. The second bit I wanted to highlight, and this goes back to the impact of our partners and community groups particularly. It's not just applicable to this area of work, but there are some real notable examples from Melton and Bloom through to the Wombles and the great work that's happening in the communities. The Friends of Melton Country Park, the Town Estate, Melton Lions, Friends of Gretton Court. We've got the Prince's Trust, or the King's Trust as it's now known. We've had our Volunteer Week, which has involved members of the public in getting involved in different things like our litter picks. We've had a number of residents involved in our community cleanup days, and we've really begun to build on those to have some impact. And it's shown the real value of that collaboration. And whilst we do bring that to life through our members' bulletins, and we always try to raise awareness of that, Councillor Glancy, I know you're really keen to make sure that we do something really to recognise the impact and outcomes achieved through collaborating with those groups, but particularly the work that those groups do. And we want to make sure that we are making those connections all the time. So what we've done over the next few slides is just give you a few of those examples, because we've put the words in the report, but we wanted to bring them to life a little bit. So here we have the work of the Friends of Gretton Court around the sensory garden, some of the great work that's been done there, and that, you know, not only from a community perspective, but also from a tenant engagement perspective is really important. And that connection, you know, all of these require a lot of time, commitment and passion. And, you know, we're very grateful for that. And it's through the work of the Friends of Gretton Court that the Prince's Trust have been involved at Gretton Court, updating the sensory guarding and having an involvement whilst also gaining skills and qualifications. So those things are really valuable. We've had some great work. You'll see the flowers there from the Melton and Bloom efforts this year. So a really proud moment for everybody when Melton and Bloom finally achieved their gold award. And that didn't happen by accident. They worked tirelessly, don't they, all the way through the year. But what was lovely to see was the effort from businesses, from other partners, from our own teams, from BIFA. And I know we were all really desperate to know the outcome. And that theme, the Olympic theme this year, was really meaningful for the borough and something that we'll want to continue with on an ongoing basis. And I'm sure you've seen them ever since then continuing to be busy as they prepare for the winter. And then moving on slightly to some of the other things that touch on this agenda around environmental quality, we have our fly tipping campaign and lots of focus and work on fly tipping, encouraging awareness, encouraging people to report around fly tipping, raising awareness of household expectations. And I know you've had a Safer Communities presentation, which will have touched on this a few months ago, but it's really relevant to this agenda. And it's been really nice to see the increased collaboration between the Melton Wombles and our Safer Communities team in particular, when they've joined on some of the litter picks. And I know they do a lot of work in terms of referring fly tips to us, not just for collection, but for investigation as well, with some real success and outcomes. So it's really pleasing to see some of those things coming through. And it's really important that our teams make those relationships real as well, that we're not just at the end of an email or an online form, but we do build those connections and relationships. Here, some of the other examples. So we've got the town centre planting, again, campaigns around tackling dog fouling, the work in the country park, and we have an awful lot of work done by the Friends of Melton Country Park. They've got a fantastic work programme, they've got a fantastic team of people who volunteer, and they've made a real difference to that space. And since Ryan's arrival with the council, I know you're starting to really strengthen those relationships and really make sure we integrate our working plans and arrangements to get the best from all of the resources and expertise that we've got around us. But then linked to that, we've had other things like our Letters to Heaven projects. So that was a community project to try and really support people who have experienced loss, but it also means that we can support wildflower areas and things like that through the letters that are provided into there. And again, our Gold Award for Melton in Bloom, which I think might feature a few times in here. So we've also had some great community projects. So, for example, our tree planting at Kirby Fields. So we had 500 trees planted on a really frosty morning, and we've had some ongoing work there to support that as the woodland starts to establish, and then some ongoing work to try and raise pride and visibility around Melton and Bloom's achievements. And the reason I raise that is it's become really interesting to me to understand just how many steps are required to have things like plaques issued onto railings and placed there on a permanent basis. So a number of things we have to overcome. And our message to our teams is that it's our job as a council to help navigate those things and not to let our communities and volunteer groups try to navigate them themselves. So an awful lot of work there. And then we've done things like our volunteer week. So that was the first time in some years that we'd put a big effort behind volunteer week. We've definitely learned from that and things that we would like to do differently next time. But it was a great opportunity to really bring volunteering opportunities to life and to get involved with our community. We've been able to support a number of initiatives through our community grant scheme that support cleaner, greener Melton, from planting wildflower areas to supporting allotments to supporting bird hides, all sorts of things. And it's great to see the coverage across the whole borough. This isn't just about the town centre. Again, on the right-hand side, we've got the work of our Friends of Country Park, and at the bottom there are some of our tenants and contractors who support us some of our community cleanups. So it's a real broad agenda, and we do try to bring the work of our teams together, but without that Pride in Place group sort of coordinating some of that, there's a risk that it could be a bit piecemeal, and we want to really maximise impact. So in terms of managing resources, because this is a really key part of what we do. So the day job of our environmental maintenance team is obviously to support our cleaner, greener borough. And we set out within the report a number of the tasks and the breadth of the tasks they have to manage. So they do cover the whole borough. They have a relatively set work programme, but it is affected by things like the weather. So seasonal demands, grass cutting seasons mean that we have to adapt and redeploy resources accordingly. We generally at the moment collate tasks that need to be managed through the winter months, but we don't necessarily have the triaging arrangements in to work out the prioritisation that goes with those, again, hence the need for that group. We have a number of partners that we work alongside. So our environmental maintenance team work particularly closely with Melton in Bloom, for example, but also with our contractor Biffa around street cleansing and the requirements contractually that they have. And we'll pick those up separately in our further scrutiny work around the Biffa contract. But then we also have work around sort of campaigns, be they littering or fly tipping, working with a wider Leicestershire Waste Partnership. There's a huge amount of work that goes into that overall. And one of the other things that comes through a little bit later in the presentation and also in the report is around our own assets, so managing our assets, maintaining our assets. And there's a huge amount of work goes into that, but we would like to enhance that by doing more in the way of management plans and really building on our more, I guess, forward planning around that, so we can then best manage the requests that come in. So that then takes me to managing requests and resources. This is an area of incredible customer demand, one of our highest areas of demand, and it can be really difficult to manage requests. Ryan has done some things to introduce opportunities to manage expectations around response times a little bit more, because we didn't necessarily have that in place before, and that can cause frustration for members and for the community. And we have been looking carefully at the online forms that are available, because often completion of an online form, which triggers a number of steps, can be a quicker route to resolution than an email that kind of goes to many, many people. So one of the things we're really keen to hear from you is actually, have we got the right things being captured as part of those online forms? Are we missing things? And just as an example, at the moment, we don't have something that captures, if you see something when you're out and about that needs looking at, we don't necessarily have a mechanism to capture that. So we end up with the emails that go to lots of people. This does link clearly and closely to our customer journey review. So Ryan's team are engaging with that to make sure that we really improve customer experience when it comes to any requests relating to this service area. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, we need to build into that a way to manage and triage some of those ad hoc requests, because that can be where the resources and time is really drained. So what Ryan has done upon joining the council is a piece of diagnostic work for us. And what we set out in the report are some of the key themes arising from that. And what we did is we just took that step back to look at what's working really well, what's perhaps not working as well as we would like, and where are the opportunities for change or enhanced collaboration and focus. So this is something that we should do as part of reviewing and enhancing our services all the time, but Ryan's arrival and expertise has provided a really helpful opportunity. So key themes arising are around resources and efficiency, making best use of those now and looking at what we need in the future to really accelerate the priorities that we've got, how to manage demand, how we best collaborate, particularly for things that sit across teams. And I'll give a really key example of that being allotments. So something that we really need to make sure that we have the plan in place to make sure that those allotments are ready to be tenanted and then can be maintained and looked after on an ongoing basis. And the absence of that collaboration has made that a little bit more difficult than we would like it to be in the future. Ryan's also identified an opportunity to give you as members increased visibility of performance around contracts, so the BIFA contract, around our service performance, just so that you know, and I think this goes back to the conversation we had at last week's committee around homelessness and housing options as well. Giving you that information up front will make it much easier for you as members. So Ryan's working hard on looking at what does that need to look like, what does good look like, and what do you need to best help you as members. And then using things like, moving to management plans and mapping to help us to be much more proactive than reactive across all of the services. And what that's led to is a number of next steps, again, that are outlined in the report, and we're happy to explain these further. But the key one being to implement that operational pride in place group. And I've set out there some of the key things that we would want to achieve through that group. To refresh the service and contract performance measures and the visibility of those. We have included a proposal which will form part of the budget setting process to increase the establishment by an extra post, which will be focused on pride in place or green and open spaces. So for a couple of years to really help us to accelerate some of those things that we need to do, but would then help us to regularise and forward plan, so it wouldn't be needed on a permanent basis. But some of those things include the management plans for all of our assets, from our cemeteries to closed churchyards through to the country park, and supporting us around our aspirations around the green flag status, but also mapping all of our assets into one system, so we have one version of that information that will be accessible to customer services, to you as members. That would make things much easier and more streamlined than they are currently, and also help us to look at things for the future. So what are the future options for allotments? What are the future options for managing things like our closed churchyards, and making sure we're using our technology most effectively. We've mentioned around volunteer recognition, and something that came through quite strongly in our briefing, actually, with the chair and vice chair on this agenda item, was how better could we communicate with our residents about what we do. And how do we really coalesce around pride in our place, and how do we build consensus around that? And some feedback from businesses recently has been an interest in getting behind that. Lydia, I'm really looking forward to you starting, because I know this is a real expertise of yours, but how do we really build that pride and understanding of the principle of what we're trying to achieve around pride in our place? So thoughts and reflections would be very, very welcome from you as a committee. So you'll be pleased to know I'm going to stop there, but just give us that reminder around cleaner, greener and collaboration to really support environmental quality. There is no one solution for this, and it will be ever evolving, but hopefully the report gives you a position update and shows you where we are now and where we'd like to go. And as always, really happy to hear your questions and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We never tire of hearing you, so you didn't have to say that. Before I open it up to discussion, I omitted to extend a welcome to Councillor Margaret Clancy, who's here tonight as the Cabinet Portfolio Holder. Sorry, Margaret. Before question, would you like to add anything, Margaret or Ryan, at this point?
Yes, this is an ongoing piece of work, and I'm really sort of grateful to the dedication that we've had from Michelle and from Ryan and the other members who have sort of actually helped in this sort of progression of where we are today. It's a huge thing, and if we make our own environment and we have pride of place, that's a very positive for every resident and visitor to the borough. It's not just aimed at a select few. Everybody will benefit from it. And I think it's what we do need to do. So I'm very, very keen. But I'm also keen on sort of this obviously as a corporate strategy. But I think forward planning is the key to this, and not keep having to be reactive to various things that do happen. The more planning we put in place, the better our maintenance, the cheaper in the long run it's going to be. But if we leave things and then we have to do a big job, it costs us a lot more, because that's just the nature of things. But yes, I'm very, very pleased to see this report, and a huge thank you to Michelle and to Ryan, but also a huge thank you to all the volunteers who, I know I keep banging on about the volunteers, but without them, we wouldn't be in the position we are now. They play a huge role in our pride and place, and they take a lot of the strain off our sort of environmental services team, the Friends of the Country Park, Melton and Bloom, Town Estate. They all play a role, and we need to all work together to achieve what we want to do. And I think we're on that road now. So thank you very much, guys.
Excuse me. Thank you for that. Okay, open to questions. Councillor Thwaites.
Well, it's partly to say a statement that when I read about the list of assets and the ownership, and that was the best thing, to be quite honest, in there, because I can only see that once we actually understand what we own, what we're responsible for, what we're able to do, and especially as ward councillors as well, to understand, are we asking the right questions? Are we being asked the right questions? The amount of time that would save, not necessarily in hours, but in the officers' time, to be able to triage it, to understand what the responses are going to be. I can only just see the massive amount of time that will save is fantastic. You know, from my example, knowing who owns or who's responsible for a pathway, has been a terrifically difficult job, you know, to actually get down to that. I'm still not down to it, but that piece of work in its own, I can only see is actually putting and making big steps forward. The other side to that is how the needs are reported. So I think do fantastic thing for things like the fly tipping as an easy way to actually report it. But it's then all the other stuff, you know, whether it's a hedge that's over a pathway that may or may not be ours, or whether it's a block drain or whatever, again, may not be ours or whatever, but in a way that it can come into a point and it can be triaged quickly and either responded to or diverted, again, will save a lot of time. And in the end, actually mean we're actually responding to the people of the borough far quicker. And so we're looking much more proactive rather than going away for a couple of weeks trying to sort it all out and then sort of coming back again. I think the bit that I mentioned when we actually talked about this originally, it is to try and remember that this isn't just a town, but it's the whole borough, and how much the team actually do across the whole borough is something we all forget a lot of the time. And just one final bit, which is the pride in Melton. I had the privilege of sitting on the Inward Investment roundtable meeting with all the businesses, or a lot of businesses from around town, and they came and said the same thing, which is pride in Melton, and so there's an immediate connection there. And so to actually take that theme right from all the businesses in the borough through to the teams here, it's a fantastically powerful, and that brings in all the volunteer groups and all the rest of it. So if you've got everybody trying to push in the same direction, it can only be a benefit. So it's trying to make that linkage as well.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you for that comprehensive description. Thank you both for your work as well. And it's very good to see. And I know from personal experience, response times to fly tipping and the team, working in the Wombles is very good. But I've got two questions. One is, Councillor Clancy mentioned the importance of the volunteers, and obviously reading the report, seeing how much effort and reliance is made upon them. Is there a way to recognise the work that they do in some form of awards? Because I think it's always, so many groups don't always get thanked, and I think it's something. If there's an opportunity, I don't know if you have something in existence, something to consider.
You'd be really pleased to know that one of the things Councillor Glancy has tasked us to do is just that. It's to establish an event not yet defined in terms of exactly what that would be like, but an opportunity to really recognise and celebrate the work of our community groups and volunteers. And it's not just in this area of our business. Our volunteers are working across many areas and are having a real impact. So I know it's something that Councillor Glancy feels really passionate about. And we've had various opportunities to sort of thank some of those groups through council meetings in the past, but something collective to really do that, I know is something we're really starting to do our planning for now. And any thoughts about how to make that as impactful as possible, we really, really welcome.
That's fantastic to hear, and anything that we can do to support them. And just my second question was, it's great to hear all these strategies and obviously plans ahead, but do you have, whether it's the minutiae of the detail, do you have a structure in place to measure them? The acronym SMART, in terms of what you're going to achieve. Can you measure them and benchmark all of these ambitions as well?
So if I come in terms of that Pride in Place group, and then Ryan, I might just look to you to talk about some of the performance measures you're wanting to put in place for the team to give members greater visibility of what's happening day to day. In terms of the Pride in Place group, so we'll establish the terms of reference and then some of the key outcomes that we need to achieve. We'll do that in consultation with Councillor Glancy, of course, as portfolio holder. Very happy to make you aware of those as a committee as well, but we'll need to make sure that there is everything passes the so what test. Otherwise we sit around a table and talk about lots of nice things. So absolutely hear the need for that. We're not yet at that stage to be able to define what that looks like though for you.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Ryan, did you want to comment on some of the wider performance in the service?
Yeah. So in terms of the team itself, I'll be looking to implement some performance indicators that look at the quality of the work that the team do. So that being the format of an inspection performer, that would a member of the team, the strategic lead, would go out and assess the quality of the work of the MT operatives, but also looking at the health and safety and making sure that they're following health and safety guidance, and also monitoring complaints received against the quality of work that we undertake as an EMT team. In terms of the BIFA contract itself and the street cleansing element, I'll be looking to do a similar setup in terms of an inspection performer, but assessing the street cleansing quality against national government guidance. So it's called the LEQSE assessment, and it looks at grading the quality of street cleansing work in terms of level of detritus, dog fouling, littering in those areas. And we're working closely with BIFA to understand what areas they are cleaning and when, in line with their schedule, so that we can go out and assess those areas as they've been cleaned. So that's a work in progress, and that will commence early next year.
Councillor Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle, earlier on you were saying ad hoc requests are quite difficult and time consuming. How can we streamline that, or how can we make it more efficient?
It's a really good question. So I think in response, I'll pick up on Alan's suggestion actually, which is around, so we have our online forms. We need a single point to receive and then coordinate responses to those requests. So at the moment, members will email. Sometimes these things are cross-cutting across a number of teams. So a number of teams will receive it, and there's always a risk of everybody involved and nobody accountable. That's always a challenge. So I think if we are able to move to a position of having a single repository to deal with those requests, but with some parameters around what we'll do with them, how we'll assess them, how we'll respond, understand. That doesn't mean we'll be able to do everything that's requested, but being honest and being able to feed that back, I'm hoping that we can work and find a way that's acceptable to you as members and also helps you to then manage expectations within the community, but also holds us to account for the things that we need to be doing. So I think if I could have one request for the team, it would be to move away from lots of emails to lots of people and move to a single point of managing some of those pride in place or environmental quality requests. That would make a really big difference. And I think it would improve the outcomes as well for residents and the quality of what we're doing and our ability to report on the outcomes.
Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, you said about complaints. What's the biggest complaints in the rural areas that you get?
So I haven't seen a formal complaint that's been registered against since I've started in September. I've only been in post for 3 months, but I haven't had a formal complaint through the formal complaints procedure for this area. So I'm not able to answer specifically what that is, unfortunately. But that is a good thing. That is a positive that we haven't had those formal complaints on the quality of work that we do. And the team do pride themselves on the quality and the high standards that they achieve out in the borough.
Thank you.
Yes, dog faces. It's a nice one to go with, isn't it? Yes. Now, obviously, it's a nuisance when dog faces aren't picked up in and around every area, but especially in Melton Town, where we have visitors coming as well, and it can put visitors off because sometimes in the town it can be that bad. And it's so unfair for visitors to come in, especially because obviously, it's a good thing for visitors to keep on visiting, obviously, for their economy wise. And I was just thinking, really, could we not have a dog warden, even part-time? I know this has been brought up some time before, but I do think it's really important. And it's not just for visitors, it's for people living here as well. And in every area where people live, it's not very nice. And obviously it's unhygienic. But if we have a dog warden, at least it will give some sort of a deterrent for people who do that thinking he could be around, because I know it can be caught up on cameras, but police can't do anything about it. So a dog warden would be brilliant. Okay.
So within the constraints of resources, we need to think about how we best manage things like that. So we do have the ability for people to report dog fouling, and we have the mechanisms to deal with dog fouling. We do campaign-based work where we know there are particular hotspots. One of those would be one that you saw on the screen a little while ago. One of our concerns is that we hear comments or we see things on social media around dog fouling. It doesn't necessarily transpire into reports that come through to us. So I would always, with anything linked to environmental quality, really encourage reporting, because if we know about it, we can do something about it. We are also looking not just linked to dog fouling, but more generally at communications around responsible dog ownership. Be that making sure that dogs are safe, in areas next to open water, or that we haven't got issues of dogs chasing others or other people. So there's a number of things we can do, and we'd be quite happy to take as feedback from the committee and need to just sort of be clear about our messaging and communications around responsible dog ownership rather than a resource specifically for that.
Can I just ask about that as well? Because when you say that we can report it, because I know some time ago that they said that you have to take a photo at the time and of the dog fouling, and the owner has to have it on its lead. Now, this is where the problem starts, because you can't always do that and have your phone ready, So how would you go about that?
I'm not sure I can answer that detailed question, Councillor Gordon. I don't know if Ryan wants to add anything, but I think it goes back to the communication point, just helping raise awareness of what people need to do, what we need in terms of evidence. And there are two elements. One is, what evidence do we need in order to prosecute or in order to take action against dog fouling, particularly persistent dog fouling, but also from a public health perspective, what information do we need in order to make sure that we can clear effectively. So certainly we wouldn't require a photo to prove that. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Ryan.
No, I haven't got anything to add to that.
Councillor Pritchard.
Chair, I think most of the rural services, apart from the housing revenue account for those residents, are related to BIFA, the BIFA bin collection, the fly tipping, and the work that they do very good with the wombles is mostly the service, and it works very well. A lot of the services that you've described in the presentation and the report are town services, and it does say in the report about getting the balance of the funding right between the town precept. Now, coming on to the dog fouling, it is a rural problem, ongoing problem. The person that we were paying for, we pay, you know, the rural people pay considerable amount in the county, was moved on to safer communities. It's about being seen, about stopping people to see if they've got the bags with them and the lead, and publicising. When the guy came out with me, we caught somebody and we did the publicity. It does need that. You know, it can't just be a press release. We've had that removed in reorganisation within safer communities, and I think we need some. We don't need somebody every day of the week. We need a sensible approach to go into the areas, to get the local publicity out on the Facebook in the villages and such like, you know, to warn people that it might happen. You might get caught.
Thank you for that. And I think, yeah, going back to that point around campaign-based work, that can be targeted work, proactive work we do across the communities. Certainly from that Pride in Place work I've outlined in the report and the presentation, the teams have asked to be able to have almost kind of two elements of that, two strands of that work, because the needs in the town centre are different sometimes to the needs of the rural areas, and the need to make sure that we don't focus on one to the detriment of the other. So I hear the points about dog fouling. We'll make sure we take that away and discuss it with colleagues, and Adam, I'm sure, will make sure that's reflected in the chair's feedback as well.
The point that Councillor Gordon was making, and you've just made about the differences, where you haven't got space, open space, you know, and you congregate at the rec, the park, you're going to get a lot of dogs and dog owners, and the issues that you're going to get about out of control and going in the water, particularly where somebody might be swimming in the country park, is an issue. Whereas in the country, that's not an issue. It's the worrying the animals and the trespassing that's the issue. So that's a contrast, because it is what you've been describing, Councillor Gordon, is probably more relevant to urban areas.
Councillor Atherton, before I weighed in.
Thank you, Chair. This year we had the awards for the people that had beautiful gardens and things like that. And I think pride in your place, I mean, if we advertise this more and get everybody to take pride in their place where they live in their small area, their community and things like that, bit by bit, we can make a difference. It doesn't necessarily need somebody patrolling to make sure people do it, but by looking at pride and making sure your area looks nice. If you see rubbish on the floor, I see so many people pound by, and I'll go and pick it up, put in the bin. It's about taking ownership of our community and our area we live in. And I think the more we do advertise what we actually do and how many communities, volunteer groups and things like that work to make this place better and nicer, we need to show the rest of the community that people are doing things, I think.
Thank you for that. I have a few points to make, or questions. I'm tempted. I don't really want to extend the discussion about dog fouling. I am notoriously not a dog person, a dog lover. I'm borderline people lover, to be honest, most of the time. But it is an issue that comes about, and I think the idea of maybe from time to time, and I understand we can't dedicate a resource. There's an awareness that you can't take the risk, because from time to time we will have some sort of campaign activity in a particular area, in the same way as the police have those camera vehicles that appear from time to time. I think would be helpful as part of the strategy to deal with it. On the report itself, I just got, I mean, the first comment is really just a comment, I hope a useful one. In the report, you've got all the different ways in which people can report online or raise issues online, and they wouldn't necessarily be complaints, of course. They might just be them saying, oh, do you know there's an overflowing bin here, or et cetera, et cetera. I think what would be useful, because when people do that, we would obviously feed back to them as individuals. It might be useful in terms of our, profile as an authority and how we're dealing with things, that we publicise. So if somebody, and I'm looking at Councillor Atherton and I say this, we can publicise as a result of public representations, 3 extra dog fouling bins have been put at the bottom of Palmerston Avenue. Do you know what I'm talking about? That we actually make public statements that show that we're reacting to the issues raised by them, because otherwise a lot goes off and the wider public out there aren't aware of the fact that we are taking note and acting on the things that are raised with this. So that might be something that could be done through the website or Facebook page, etc. The other 2 points I want to raise, I mean, it's firstly about volunteers, and I entirely support what Councillor Glancy has said about that, and the emphasis being given to the importance of their work. But one of the risks with volunteers is that it can be uneven. I mean, I know, quite a number of the members of Melton in Bloom, and when I run into them, the conversation often starts off saying, still alive then, because, they're not the youngest group in the town, and neither am I amongst the youngest group in the town. And sometimes you can get little gaps created because volunteers fall away for various reasons, and having a strategy not to let things slide because of that, and looking at how we can actually do that. And actively recruiting for volunteers, I think, would be something we should perhaps be considering, because allotments are a good example, aren't they? Where it doesn't take long for allotments to fall into disrepair if the people who rent them are unable to keep up the work. So that's really just a suggestion that could be looked at. And the second one is more of a question, which I did raise in the briefing, and of course we list all the different groups that are active in the town, but it means we have an interface with them, and sometimes that interface doesn't run as smoothly as it could. And I think there's still work to be done in that area. And choosing my words very carefully over simple things like what colour the benches should be in the market square, because there are different organisations owning different bits of land, and I think that's still work. There's still work to be done there to improve those relationships, so that we're actually all working together. And I think, one final issue, and again, just asking something to be given consideration to, whether there's the potential, and perhaps you already do this, is for the mapping of hotspots when it comes to littering. I know we have issues with fly tipping, large fly tipping, but I could think, one hotspot, just after COVID, as soon as COVID rules were lifted, the outside Welby Church was an area I often walked by. All the McDonald's packaging started appearing, from every evening. So there are certain hotspots we know about, and how of general littering, and how we can focus on those areas to try and improve that, whether it's through the use of volunteers, whether it's trying to catch people. I don't know what the best way to do that is, but we must know where these areas are and have the potential to act on them. So those are just observations that I had. I mean, I value the report that's been presented, and I think we all understand the importance for the future of the town in actually doing this work and actually building on what's already been done. And I think the other thing within it, which I'd like to just pay reference to, is that it's starting to see it as an overarching issue. It's not in a little compartment that sits in one part of the organisation. It needs to actually thematically run through all that we do as a council. And I know some of the work you've done in the workshop that you had, for instance, was actually picking that up. So that's my 2 pence for now. Over to other. I don't know who put the hand up first. I'm going to say Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it's just something that I just want some information on, really. It's the emergency response arrangements, which are person-centred, as it says here, but understanding and expectations could be better managed through a minor update to policies and procedures. Now, I know it's going really well. As far as I know, this emergency response arrangements, they are up and running and going really well. And I just wondered how the minor update to policies and procedures, what sort of things are you thinking of doing?
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Ryan to comment if that's okay. So I know it's something you've been really keen to do to bring some clarity around our flooding response and our sandbag deployments. If I can hand to you.
Yeah, so this particular example that Michelle's mentioned with flooding and response was around creating or enhancing our existing policy on sandbag deployment. So there wasn't, at the moment, there isn't a specific maximum number of sandbags, for example, that any one house could have. So we've had requests for 20 sandbags, which could deplete the stock quite significantly for other householders to use. So one of my actions is to go away and review that policy and have a look at updating it to have a maximum number of sandbags per household, so that we can help more people, but also strengthening that out of hours relationship with our contractor, Biffa, on managing those stock levels daily, especially around when there's predicted rainfall or flood alerts, so that we've always got significant stock of sandbags available for deployment. So it's there in the basis already. It's just strengthening it a little better so that we've got that resilience.
Thank you very much, Chair. In your comments, you did mention littering from certain fast food outlets, and that is one problem that we do encounter, particularly in my ward. It seems to be the point where all the meals are finished, they're thrown out of the window, and it is referenced that it is a particular brand in the town centre. Is there any opportunity to work with these fast food outlets to try and reduce littering? Because it's quite an eyesore, and it's for those having to pick it up. So it may be an opportunity to be more proactive directly with them. So it's just an observation.
That's really helpful feedback. Thank you. And I don't have the answer to the question around any work that's ongoing now. That's not to say it isn't happening, but that's definitely something we'll feed back, and the kind of thing that I hope that Pride in Place group will be able to look at as well, whether it be around engagement with businesses or any of the other powers that we might have at our disposal. So yeah, really helpful point. Thank you.
Before I get passed into Councillor Pritchard, I must emphasise that other fast food outlets are available, as are a range of brands of cigarettes and vodka, which also accompanied the same littering. But I don't want to get nailed after this for singling out a particular company. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you. Just first of all, there are rural littering hotspots that we're trying to deal with, and we also have in the Vale of Belvoir and Bodyford the drive-through litter to deal with. We've got those to deal with. Just on the planning for the sandbags, I think at the last storm when supplies were needed, they didn't get out to Bodyford. In other words, they'd run out or were taken at Long Clawson. So I think it's worth looking at your plan as to what the local stocks are, how you plan that, and how you deal with it in future. I think that would be a good one.
Chair, if I might just come in on that one. That's a really helpful feedback. And I think one of the challenges last time was that some flooding happened in places that we'd not necessarily experienced flooding before, and it happened at pace. So with the issues around the surface water flooding, but it's also caused us to take a step back and just think about where our local resilience is as well, because we can have sandbag deployment from the depot, but that doesn't mean that we can get through traffic any quicker to get sandbags to some of our communities. And that was also one of the challenges in some of the recent flooding that we had, because our teams were in traffic trying to get to places. So what we do have in some communities, so Frisbee is a good example, we have sandbag store in the community, and that means that communities can help themselves in that immediate moment. And I do wonder if it's worth, Ryan, you following up with Councillor Pritchett just to look at anything that we might be able to do to support the Bottisford community in that regard as well.
Thank you, Chair. it's to do with flooding. When you said you were looking maybe allocating a set amount of sandbags per house, I like that idea because I know some had lots of sandbags to protect, and then the house next door had next to nothing. My worry is if you have a small house and you only need a few, but the house next to you is slightly larger and maybe more of a slope, it's going to get the same sandbags as the one before, but it's still going to end up flooded. So there's got to be a balance between the size of houses where they are situated. If somebody's at the bottom of a hill, they're going to get more water coming down to theirs than if they're at the top, but both of them could be flooded. So there's the knowledge of how the flood works, how a house is affected, that is going to be important rather than having a blank, right, per household, 10 sandbags. That is not going to work because you do need to know where the floods are, how the houses are differently affected by the floods rather than having a standard set of sandbags, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sorry, it's just to go back to listening to all the different parts. Part where we talked about the ease of reporting and a way of reporting whatever it is into the council, and the metrics that we can get from that to actually help identify the different hotspots, even if they're not our responsibility, because it then gives us some of the evidence if it's going to go to the local flood authority or the county council for whatever reason, because it's theirs. If it gives us a better chance, it's better than me complaining to the county council about something, and and then Councillor Sharp or whatever, because it's all individual pieces. Because if it gives us the ability to go with a lot more evidence and a lot more borough-wide evidence, it just makes it more powerful. So I just want to emphasise how important I think that ease of reporting is to the whole situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful point. And I think in the moment when you're trying to deal with a flood response, it can feel quite chaotic because you're inundated with calls. People are emotional and worried, and that's understandable. And so we try really hard to triage information and requests, and then we feed that through to the county council. But then we have a requirement to be able to report on where vulnerable people are there any particular issues? To what extent are those issues? I'm aware that some councils in other parts of the country have developed sort of more localised forms. So we talked about the importance of those reporting forms to allow for more of that contextual information to be collated. And as you're talking, it's making me think about different forms that might help us actually in various scenarios, and that might be one to build on. But also with some of those, hotspots issues that we've got, or, particular littering issues or particular issues around environmental quality, if we could be receiving those and triaging them, but it also helps us to then inform future policy, inform future budgets, inform future programs of work or connection with partners. So we recognise from our customer journey work, not everybody will feel able to use those forms, but we can do the same through our customer services team. But one thing that strikes me as we're talking is we do a lot of reporting on volumes of calls that come into customer services, how quickly respond to those calls, how effective we are in responding to those calls, the nature of people's inquiries when they come into Parkside. But what we don't do is tell you the volume, that why people are contacting us through those forms or why people are calling us, and giving you more of an insight into that. So I think improving that performance information to you to give you those greater insights as well will be helpful and inform some of those longer term discussions. So we will take an action away regarding that.
Yeah, just to come back, I mean, and as you know, I'm not the greatest fan of the county council, but one of the ways to report things like trees, drains, or whatever, and their system of actually going through a checklist, putting the location down, it is actually quite useful. And even that basic information, like I said, to sort of say, well, we're constantly getting that fall, just before Wymondham or wherever, there's a point where they've eaten the meal and then they're throwing it out, sort of thing. It just gives us that information, and that information is power at the end of the day to actually understand what we can do against it.
Thank you. I mean, again, this is just an observation, and I've got a specific I want to raise about back to littering. I mean, one of the problems it seems to me over flooding at the moment is that we are seeing flooding where we didn't see it before. We're seeing a changed landscape, and of course, as an authority, we don't have that direct responsibility. And I know that there's been extensive engagement with the appropriate bodies, the Environment Agency, etc. But I think at the moment predictability is quite difficult because the changing climate we seem to be facing is causing flooding in new areas. So it's something we've got to be quite sharp about in terms of responding and recognising where those changes are taking place. Just going back to littering, and can I just say, Councillor Pritchett, the area I was talking about is a rural area, and I think there's a particular aspect of littering in rural areas, which is largely due to, cars picking up supplies and going off down country lanes at particular times of the night and early hours. But in terms of the town littering, one of the issues that I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about is the number of bins that are now available. And I know that there are fewer bins in Melton than there used to be, because being a bit anal about not dropping litter, I used to map out where they are. So there is a reduction, and I guess that's down to how the waste contract operates, and there's a cost to running bins. But will that be part of the process of engaging with BIFA in due course over the new contract? And do we have any sort of take on whether there are areas that might see an improvement in littering if we actually provided more bins and more ways in which people can dispose of it?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that we can review. We've recently, myself and Councillor Garnsey have recently discussed Melton Country Park, a similar situation where some areas of the park, the litter bins are utilised a lot more, so it would benefit from probably more in those areas rather than other areas of the park that aren't used at all. So I think the next steps with that would be to really work with BIFA, who are there on the ground emptying these bins, to understand kind of utilisation rates and how that data looks. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely something that we can review and explore further.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members of the committee? Councillor Thwaites.
Sorry, there was just one extra thing in the notes, because it's a question I'm asked on a regular basis, and it's actually having visibility of the schedule for different pieces of work. And I know that's always difficult because it's ad hoc things are going to come in and knock it, but it's things like the grass cutting. It's trying to put something out there, so what work you're going to do in the winter for the hedges that we're responsible for and that sort of thing, so people get an expectations of seeing what they are. Again, with the caveat that things will always change because things happen, but it's just making it more public.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the things that the Pride in Place group will really help us to do in the work that's being proposed around the ability to map everything, create the schedules and make them more visible to more people, and also improving that communication. Because, yeah, again, when we were writing the report, we're saying there is so much work that happens, but we don't necessarily communicate it in a way that helps to build that awareness and then trust and confidence. So yeah, really helpful point. Councillor Glancy, did you want to come in there?
Yes, just quickly. I think that's a very good point, and it's something that we have talked about. I know we've sort of Ryan and I have mentioned it. It's the fact that if we have that work plan available and members have it, when you're contacted, well, my grass hasn't been cut, or well, actually, it's on the list. It's going to get done in 2 weeks' time. That will then save officers time, because we've already answered that as the best as we possibly can from the worksheet that we've got in front of us, so we can actually help to relieve the pressure on the sort of officers as well. But I think that's a very, very worthwhile thing to have.
Thanks, Chair. Just in Waltham and that, the parish council now, if there was anything like overhanging branches on the pavements and stuff like that was interfering, a lot of the time we are finding that we're having to find out whether it was MBC's problem, or whether it's county council problem, or whether it was the actual owner of the property. What we found in the end was having a note. The county council, the parish council was putting notes, writing down, say, this tree's overhanging, please can we have it sorted, and that, and just passing it through into the owner's property, just for them to be aware. If they didn't do it, well, fair enough, but a lot of the time when it was viewed from a person who probably didn't walk them down that street thinking, oh, it's overhanging. Yeah, all of a sudden the resident person is saying, yes, it is interfering, we'll have it cut down. Or sometimes I always find the best action is just get on and do it and that, and just I know health and safety, you don't like saying that, but I sometimes think it's the quickest way to get it over and done with and cut it out. But that was a good point that we found with the parish council, with putting letters through, well, not a little note, say, can you just a handwritten letter. And it's surprising what it did. It saved a lot of time having to go back to find the address, to do this, to do that. And it's just a handy thing to have.
Just going to mention that the newly introduced Bottesford Parish Council newsletter, the clerk has put all the Elton Borough Council, County Council, all the ways you report overhanging hedges, footpaths, drains blocked, you know, that sort of thing. And when you go to the clerk, so you can cut it out and put it on your fridge all in one place, so you don't have to keep going to try and find different pages.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, the street cleaning vehicles, when they go round, especially in the early hours of the morning, they go round by the flats, the noise is so loud. Is there any way that you can reduce the noise in these vehicles?
Unfortunately not. Are you referring to the mechanical sweeping vehicles? Yeah, unfortunately, not that I'm aware of that there's a way to reduce the noise. There's contracted times specified within the contract of when they can and can't operate. So as long as they're operating within those times, we wouldn't have any basis for challenging that. So it should be within a time that's considered reasonable that they're undertaking these works, unless that you know otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's around 7 o'clock. Sometimes it might be a bit earlier than that, but sometimes around 7 o'clock. So that's about right time, would you say? Because I know they go around, because obviously I know that they have to get there before cars start parking down the street or in the car parks, and they can get as much done as possible before that happens. So I don't understand why. It's just that I just wondered if there was any way to reduce the noise, because you know, it isn't very nice for residents, especially the older ones. Yeah.
It's certainly something I can go back and have a conversation with Biffa about. 7 o'clock is within the contractual times, and I think it's just having that understanding that it's not every day, so it's not a constant occurrence or nuisance. It's in line with the scheduled rota, but I can go back and review if there are any alternatives.
Okay, are there any further questions members wish to raise? If not, I'd like to thank Michelle and Ryan and Margaret, of course, for this report. And obviously we'll pull together the various comments and suggestions made in the report that Scrutiny makes to Cabinet. Okay, the final item of business says urgent business to consider any items that the chair considers urgent. I don't, and I've not had any notified to me before by any members of the committee, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for attending.